It may seem crazy, but the greatest battle of the human being is with his own creation, and his greatest creation is himself. Any confrontation between characters shows the quality of the forces inherent in them. Therefore, respect, care, and attention in managing each character and their actions nurture the prudence that the being in manifestation so greatly needs. A prudence that is not opposed to boldness or transgression, and that supports the being a being who faces the being in a being. The book carries much of this madness while also presenting itself as a balm, bringing life to the cemetery that the manifested being calls existence. For the accident that manifested life represents, the view of its environment does not differ from the enchanting vision that worms have of excrement or that insects have of pigsties. Pollution, which produces magnificent images of sunrises or sunsets, reflects the contamination that the human being generates within himself. Just like worms and insects, the being prioritizes the deceptive vision of a false external beauty, ignoring the blatant presence of neural pollutants. But worms and insects love their world. In fact, among the concepts involving madness, one highlights the habit of classifying those who act or think differently from what the being in manifestation defines as normality. The vision of a relationship between two associated beings, based on giving as a premise, becomes something unacceptable to apparent sanity. This premise creates a field so fertile that it allows a sowing capable of transforming two into one. The initial and common problem of opposites transforms into the expansion of a unique being, living in a unique being, becoming a single being, through the perfect symbiosis in which there is no ruler. The awakened consciousness and the heightened sense of non-belonging give access to previously untouched places. Each body acts and reacts in fullness, and the being perceives itself as complete. This association is a path where wisdom flows naturally. The surrender of one into the other does not represent the renunciation of being, but rather the strengthening of being on the journey toward unity. Ignorance, however, accompanies the manifestation of the being, and between ignorance and knowledge lies faith. Wisdom does not accompany faith, but leads to knowledge. Those who act solely driven by faith tend toward error and risk. It seems foolish to advise against believing. It seems foolish to guide toward the understanding that beliefs stagnate the being. But what is offered, in contrast to beliefs, actions based on knowledge, and therefore, indisputable and unquestionable. That is why the ability to read will never cease to exist in the being. The frequent exercise of this skill develops a musculature so wise and subtle that it becomes untouchable by its own consistency. One must understand what reading means. To touch the universe, the being must know how to read this universe. Habit builds a musculature that is denser, subtler, or more permeable to any and every world. Believing without questioning is not a good habit and is contrary to all science. Throughout this journey, one learns that the being must observe itself, in its absorptions and corruptions. Returning to the idea of life after death, for example, one observes how it is used to instill fear in the being. The intention is to compel it to behave according to rules, where good behavior will be rewarded, while bad behavior will be subject to various punishments, proportional to the severity of the mistake. It seems that the being buys into this idea, and submits its freedom to the commandments attached to it. However, the clear perception of the phenomenon of regrets, especially in so-called old age, also generates, in parallel, reflections on the actions taken, as well as on what was done, and what was left undone. The allegory of the confession of sins places the individual in the dilemma of the comfort brought by forgiveness, since the promise of rewards and punishments in the afterlife does not always seem to meet what is desired or considered deserved.